broadcasting from Georgia, where hundreds of supporters of Troy Davis began rallying outside the prison in Jackson, just 40 miles from Atlanta, where we are right now. It was the early afternoon hours ahead of the execution that was scheduled for 7 p.m. Shortly after 7, the crowd erupted into thunderous cheers. For a moment, it appeared that the Supreme Court had stayed the execution.
We hear a lot of definitions of patriotism in this country, but patriotism is what was shown by Troy Davis, saying, let's hold out hope to the last minute. Always hold out hope to the last minute. This is not supposed to happen here.
What did Troy tell you the last time you saw him?
The last time it's part of the reasons.
We're hearing some kind of cheer that has gone up.
Got a miracle. You're going to have to start getting religious.
We're here with Larry. We're here with Larry Cox, and we're here with the president of the NAACP, Ben Jealous. People are.
It's a great day for our country.
I would like. People are hugging each other. Journalists are gathering around. People are screaming behind us.
That's what we've just heard. We're
on TV, we're broadcasting live. All the different reporters are here. We just broadcast your speech. This is Democracy Now! Tell us who you are and what your thoughts are right now.
I'm Rosalind Brockett. I'm chairman of the board of the NAACP.
This is the youngest chair of the board of the NAACP. What did you just hear?
I just heard that he just received a stay. And we serve a God who is able. And we're so grateful right now. Oh, we're just so grateful right now. And we're so happy tonight.
Did you think you were going to hear this?
We are faithful people, and we are praying people, and we're so grateful tonight.
For hours, supporters of Troy Davis, after realizing that this news was not the case, that the decision to execute Troy Davis was not stayed, people prayed, they sang, they waited for news from the Supreme Court. At about 11:15, the crowd went silent when it was learned the High Court would not stop the execution. Prison officials began the execution minutes later at about 10:53 Georgia time. Troy Davis died at 11:08 p.m. Soon afterwards, as we learned the news, we spoke with Ben Jealous, President and CEO of the NAACP.
My heart goes out. It goes out to the McPhail family. We're surrounded by the Davis family. All of our hearts are broken. I've known his nephew since his nephew was 3 years old. But right now, it goes out to the guards. There was a moment the other day when my staff was in there and the family was in there, and the guard leaned over to Martina and asked her to hold it together because he said, we're just barely holding it together. He said, my mom's been praying for you guys for days, and there was a sense that if she started crying, the guards would start crying. And we have to remember that these are men, these are working class men and women, in a rural area looking for a good paying job to support their family. And this shouldn't be part of it. They know they may have to execute somebody, but having to execute somebody in the midst of so much doubt. When the former warden used to be the boss here saying, stay the execution. The former head of the FBI saying, stay the execution. Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals, all saying, stay the execution. It's absolutely inhumane. It's not just a crime against Troy Davis. It's a crime against our democracy. It's a crime against those specific men and women who are called to hold down his left leg or his right leg amidst so much doubt when even their old boss is saying, stop this, don't do it.
And yet the current warden
telling you that he was a Savannah police officer 22 years ago.
Right, as if that should mean anything other than the fact that he would want to reopen the case if there's any doubt. I mean, it was this sort of chilling notion that, we're going to get it this time. We're going to do it this time.
And explain what it was that Warden Humphreys, why he was telling you this, why you were meeting with him.
Because for more than a year they'd stonewalled media from talking to Troy Davis, and they were even. There was a witness. What had prompted most recently, CNN tried to get into a witness who's being held in prison, and they wouldn't let the witness speak either. And I said to him, look, among everything else, at the end of the day, we're also worried about your guards having to execute amid so much doubt. And he said, that's exactly why I won't let those media in here. And I said, well, there's another way. He said, well, there's, you can let the truth out, and we can maybe get the right person behind bars. And he said, well, there's another side of the story. And I said, no. I said, I know. And he said, and I was on law enforcement in Savannah 22 years ago. And I said, no, I didn't realize that. And what does that mean? And why are you saying it to me? And why is that how we end this conversation? Reality is, our hope right now is that people won't close their hearts and their minds, but rather they'll keep their hearts and their minds open. They'll ponder what this means for our nation. They'll search their souls and question, if they supported the death penalty before this, can they any longer, knowing that it's such a blunt instrument that we will execute amongst so much doubt. We hope that people will show the discipline, the faith of the Davis family, and ultimately Troy has shown throughout this himself, believing that ultimately, as he put it, this movement started before I died, and it must continue to grow no matter what until we abolish the death penalty. His mom was an NAACP member. She had taken part in the sit-ins of the 60s. She raised her children to be conscious people, to think about the world. And, we see some of that spirit tonight as James Byrd's family, as his killer was executed, the horrible hate crime in Texas, coming forward and saying, please don't do this in our name. Know that Governor Perry doesn't do this in our name. We don't want to see the death penalty happen here. Same thing happened in Mississippi, where a young white man's been charged for literally lynching a black man just a few months ago, caught on videotape, and the family, the victim, coming forward saying, don't do this. We should seek the death penalty here. There is another way. It's been said a long time ago that an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. This is a time for us as a nation to evolve and to catch up with the rest of the Western world, who has cut bait with this barbaric practice for this very reason, that it's possible for the innocent to be executed, because we're all human and human error happens, human hearts harden, and all of a sudden what we thought was justice starts to look more and more just like vengeance.
Does this mean another kind of organizing?
Yes, 15 years ago in this country, I was at the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty. It's the 20th anniversary of the reinstatement of the death penalty, and the movement was forced to make a choice. Do we continue with a court-based strategy, or do we switch and actually focus on a strategy based on changing the law, and in many cases changing the DA? We've employed that strategy for the last 15 years, and in that time we've seen massive progress. We've abolished the death penalty for juveniles. We've abolished it for people that the court refers to quite crudely as the mentally retarded. We've abolished it in the last 2 years alone in New Mexico, in New Jersey, in the state, in President Obama's home state, the great state of Illinois.
Yet he supports the death penalty.
And I hope that he's questioning it tonight. I hope that he's in this moment as a constitutional law professor, looking at the limits of the U.S. Constitution. I mean, here we are. Yes, the letter of the Constitution does not contain any guarantee against executing the innocent, but the spirit of our nation does. The spirit of the Constitution does. I was blessed to grow up in a family where on one side we go back to Bunker Hill and the Revolution, and on the other side we go back to Reconstruction statesmen. And the reality is that both those families, as torn apart as they've been at different moments, agree the tradition of both those families that we as a nation should be a beacon for human rights in this world. And we are not a beacon tonight. We are a very dim light in the world tonight. The world is ashamed of our nation tonight. We are patriots. We believe in our nation, but it is hard for the rest of the world to see us as a beacon for human rights when things like this can happen here.
As I'm looking behind you, I am seeing that the family must have gone back behind the other people who are vigiling, and news organizations are now saying that the execution has begun.
Yes, we had heard that it may happen around 11:08 p.m. It's a very sad night here in Georgia, and it is. We came here prepared for a miracle or a funeral, and we've witnessed both. Every minute that this was stopped, that there was a reprieve, there was a delay, was a miracle. And ultimately, it has turned into a funeral. And those of us who knew Troy Davis, who sat with him, who talked to him, know that he was somebody who was full of love for his family, full of love for humanity, full of love for a movement that he was born into, a movement for civil and human rights in this country. Somebody who said, this movement started before I died. No matter what happens on the 21st, it must grow stronger. We're now within 10 states of abolishing the death penalty in this country. We just have to get to 26 before it will not just be found to be cruel as it has been in the past in the Supreme Court, but we can also prove it is unusual. And we've abolished it in 3 states in the last 2 years. And we have to move forward with the spirit. Troy Davis, he said that they may take my body, but they'll never take my spirit because I gave my spirit to God. But we certainly cannot allow this to take our spirit either. This has to be a night when we defiantly recommit ourselves to the nonviolent struggle for justice in this country. And we commit ourselves not just to abolishing the death penalty in our lifetime or in this century, but in this decade. And we can do it if we're focused. The states like Connecticut and Maryland, where we've come very close recently, we need to push harder. There are other states where we think we could even break through. People look at us.
How do you push harder?
Push harder by organizing smarter, by doing what Dr. King admonished us to do, and actually organizing coalitions that are uncomfortably large. We saw some of that here, with Republicans coming forward and former officials in the DOJ department, the Department of Justice for George W. Bush coming forward, former head of the FBI coming forward, Jimmy Carter joining Bob Barr, Tutu joining Larry Thomas. We need to do more of that.
So there are 34 states that have the death penalty.
And we need to reduce that to 24, so it's a minority of states. And this country, the eighth amendment to the Constitution requires that to ban a punishment, it must be both cruel and unusual, not or. And so to get to unusual, we got to abolish it in 10 more states, and we can get that done.
And have you targeted particular ones?
We know, yes. I mean, we have pushed hard in the state of Connecticut recently. We've come within a couple of votes. We faced a governor, who opposed us, but a state legislature is very much with us. We're going to keep pushing forward in states like that. I've got to wrap up.
Finally, Ben, what will happen tonight? Troy is being executed right now. The hearse is going to take his body where?
The hearse will take his body to have an autopsy performed by the state. And then we will move, the body will move from there ultimately to a funeral home. And a funeral will be planned. But right now, execution will occur, and it will be taken for an official state autopsy.
According to CNN, the Georgia Department of Corrections confirms the execution process begins around 11:05 or 11:10 p.m. Eastern Time, which is right now.
This is a very sad moment. Excuse me.
That was Ben Jealous, President and CEO of the NAACP. We were speaking on the grounds of the death row prison in Jackson, Georgia. The execution of Troy Davis began at about 10:53 p.m. He died at 11:08 p.m., September 21st. After Troy Davis was executed, some of those who witnessed his death came out of the death chamber to the prison grounds to describe what they saw. Among the eyewitnesses was Troy Davis's attorney, Jason Ewart.
I had the unfortunate opportunity tonight to witness a tragedy, to witness Georgia execute an innocent man. Troy Davis died tonight at approximately 11 o'clock, 11:08 p.m. And with him died his quest for justice and the truth. In the midst of all the newspaper headlines and litigation and lawsuits and vigils, one can lose sight of the man who lived on death row for half his life. Troy Davis is beloved by his sisters, by his brother, by his niece, by his nephew, by his many, many friends, by his attorneys, by his supporters. He was a family man, and his family mourns tonight. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the Davis family, each and every one of them, and the McPhail family, both of whom have lost a dearly loved family member. The innocent have no enemy but time, and Troy's time slipped away tonight. This case struck a chord in the world, and as a result, the legacy of Troy Davis doesn't die tonight. Our sadness, the sadness of his friends and his family, is tempered by the hope that Troy's death will lead to a fundamental legal reforms so we'll never again witness with inevitable regret the execution of an innocent man like we did tonight.
Troy Davis's attorney, Jason Ewart, one of the witnesses to the execution, invited by Troy Davis himself. We then spoke on the grounds of the Jackson death row prison with Thomas Ruffin. He was the other eyewitness invited by Troy Davis.
I'm one of Troy Davis's lawyers. Mr. Jason Ewart of Arnold and Porter and I, as two of Mr. Davis's witnessed what I regard as a legalized lynching. Mr. Ewart also is one of Troy's lawyers. What I basically would say is that this is a circumstance where, first of all, Troy, Mr. Davis, very bravely, in the morally upright fashion that he's always conducted himself around me, in very clear terms, spoke to three classes of people. First of all, he spoke to the McPhail family, and he said to them, without equivocation, that he didn't kill Mark McPhail, that he didn't even have a gun on the night of August 18, 1989, and that he had nothing to do with the violence that resulted in Officer McPhail's death. Then he said something to the McPhail family, to his own family, and to his supporters. And that was that he would certainly hope that the McPhail family, and certainly he urged his own family and his supporters to go deeper into this case and bring the McPhail family, that is for his lawyers, most definitely his family, including, I would say, our leader in this, Martina Correia, and his sister Kim Davis, for them to lead the McPhail family into a deeper scrutiny into this case so that they can see two things: that Troy Davis did not kill Officer McPhail, but rather that someone else did. And then, in his final words, he more or less called upon everybody who would want what's right, who would want what's morally right, and whatever this thing called justice is, if it means anything good, who want that, to bring an end to this madness called capital punishment as it's applied in the United States. And out of all of that, I basically say that Troy Davis, whose case was one that was, you say, riddled with doubt. It was riddled with sworn recantations from the witnesses who put him in the place where he was convicted by a predominantly white jury and a white judge and then sentenced to death. 7 of those 9 witnesses recanted, and then additional witnesses under oath came forward and identified the actual perpetrator of the crime. And if in that situation, Georgia and the United States can kill somebody who's actually innocent, that's not just a legalized lynching. That's a threat to all innocent life in this society.
Thomas Ruffin was one of the witnesses to the execution, invited by Troy Davis himself. Troy Davis was executed by the state of Georgia at 11:08 Eastern Standard Time. We broadcast the 6-hour coverage of the execution from the prison grounds in Jackson, Georgia. To see the full report, you can go to our website at democracynow.org. Back in a minute.